Hello everyone. I've been running experiments over this last flight season. I have over 100 launches. My experiments have been trying to refine using streamers in low power rockets. And I'd like to start showing some of the results that I have. Several people have asked me, hey, can you show us some of the stuff that you've done? What are some of the results that you've worked on? So let's take a look at some of these things. Just recently I was asked, how do you wind a streamer? Well, let's take a look at what I've done with, for an example, rocket, which is the Gnome rocket. This Gnome rocket sometimes appears to be just a little toy rocket, but I look at this as a rocket with a lot of potential. One thing I've done was to replace the recovery system, which had a rubber band on it, the good old Estes elastic band, the shock cord, and instead I have a Kevlar cord wrapped around the engine mount, which then goes inside the body, and then it comes out the end. This Kevlar cord is about 4 feet long and terminates with a little blanket. This is actually Kevlar felt. It's really nice because you can cut it almost any direction you want, and it's very, very tough. So this is about a 1/2 inch by about 3.5. Notice the shape is rectangular because we're going to fold this over on top of the streamer. And this is connected then to the nose cone. I put some glue on this knot because if you have just the Kevlar cord on there, the stress can sometimes cause the cord to cut through the eyelet, but the knot helps it with the glue, and it helps it distribute the force. So this is the way I've modified the actual Gnome rocket. I can go into the details on this at a future point in time. I'd just like to show you exactly what I did. A question came up a night ago was, well, how do you wind a streamer? Now, the streamer that goes into this rocket, it ships with a streamer that looks like this. This streamer is only a foot long. The primary purpose of this streamer is to tumble the rocket. So with the streamer attached to the shock cord, with the nose cone off, the rocket can't nosedive, but rather it tends to tumble. So the nose keeps on being pulled back and forth. The tumbling of the rocket will slow it down, and a rocket this small will just basically bounce off the ground at that point. However, I like flying much longer streamers, much more visible streamers. There's a couple of reasons. The primary reason is once you launch a very small rocket like this, once it's up a couple hundred feet, it's impossible to see. And even with this streamer out, it's still very, very difficult to see simply because it's very small. So I like flying with a much, much larger streamer. I'm going to show you a moment what I've been using. Another reason is that when this is actually on the ground, it's still very difficult to see because if you've got some weeds, even grass 3 or 4 inches long, this streamer will most likely be buried in the grass, and this rocket's going to fall. You're still going to lose it. So the long streamers are very, very important to help recovery, to help you spot it on the way down and also find it when it's on the ground. So what have I done? I'm going to show you this. Take the rocket out. I actually created a very long streamer that looks like this. So the question that was put to me is like, well, gee, Brett, how do you wind that up and put that inside of this tiny little rocket body? So I'm going to show you how I do that. But in order to show you how I do that, you have to understand how I constructed this streamer to begin with. The streamer is 7 feet 10 inches, and that is a very special length because it will fit in here with the actual Kevlar felt blanket. So we start out, we have this attached on this end, but let's take a look at what happens as we kind of look toward the end of the streamer. So if we fold the streamer backwards on itself, we start up by having the end about 6-8 inches from the actual connection point. And if we go toward the left, the midpoint where this folds over is right here. So the streamer, you can see, is not being wound from the end, but rather it's being wound from the center of a fold. This is very important because as you start twisting this material, many times it's going to curl up on you, which means it's going to be very difficult to unwind. Also, the curls make it sometimes not very easy to rewind. So what this does is it puts the twisted part in the center of the wind from the center of the streamer. So when the streamer opens up, it basically stretches it back out. So you can see this streamer has been used before, and it's very no real curls to it, even though I had this wound up actually for several days inside the rocket. So let's take a look at how this gets wound up. The trick to all of this, and again I'm going to show you this a little bit one more time. We got the streamer with the connection point up here, and the center point of that fold is right here. Now you might notice that I've got some black marks on there. Well, that's just simply to help me understand where the fold is, because sometimes this crease can completely go away. But with this mark on here, I know exactly where to wind it again. Now, how do you wind something like this? Well, this material is called bird scare tape, and it's used for putting in trees and around plants, and it's got this nice crinkly sound which will scare birds away, and also the reflections will also scare the birds away. This is called bird scare tape. Now, there's different types of this. This particular one is material I'm trying experimentally. It's a little bit thinner than some of the other bird scare tapes, but I just want to try it because being thinner, it'll be lighter, a little bit easier for these smaller rockets to lift. Okay, so how do we wind this? Well, the trick is to use this stiff wire. This stiff wire is a wire used for hanging ceiling tiles. It's about an 1/8 inch, so you can use this stiff wire like this, or you can use actually an 1/8 inch Estes launch rod if you want. The difference is that this is a little bit rougher, so it's a little bit easier to grab onto the streamer, whereas a launch rod may be a little bit more difficult to work with. So given that we have this nice stiff wire, about an 1/8 inch, we can actually place this streamer center point on this rod. Now the trick here is that this has to be extremely square. If this part is not done correctly, the entire wind is not going to work. So if we square this up, and we can easily tell, if we were misaligned, we would start seeing stuff like this. But this is very square. Now to get this started, I put my thumbs on the edges and I literally pull horizontally. So I'm pulling the streamer horizontally, extremely tight, and now I'm going to just start rolling it. And that's all there is to it. Now the streamer now is starting to wind on here. You see it's off by a little bit here. That's okay. We can kind of tap this down with our thumbs. But now that we have this gripped onto the rod, we can now wind it very, very quickly. Whoops. You see there? I accidentally let it go. You see it sprung open, which is really nice. That's really what we want to have. We want these streamers to pop open as quickly as possible. Let me try this again, and I'll hold it tighter a little bit longer. You see, as I'm winding, it's a little bit off center here. But again, that's okay, because as long as you got a nice square start on it, you just push with your thumbs and it'll just come right back. So this thing will hold a little bit tighter as I start winding it, and there we go. You see it'll slide back and forth a little bit, but that's okay. There's usually a tendency to say, oh, I'm going to really twist this thing and get it nice and tight. If you do that, you won't be able to get the rod out. So be careful not to make this too tight. Just lightly roll it up. And you can see how quickly this winds. And then we're done. Now to get the rod out, simply twist it the opposite direction and slowly pull it out. If you pull too fast, or if you rotate or don't rotate the rod, it's going to pull the center of the streamer out, and well, you can start over again. So pull this out, and keep in mind it is still a little bit loose. Now, I like squeezing it on the ends to square it up to make sure that it's a nice, even wind. And we can compare this now with the size of our body tube. You see this fits in quite easily. You can imagine that we're going to have our felt blanket on each side, the Kevlar felt. Now, one thing that's really important is once we have this wound, is we can actually make this wind a little bit tighter. So you grab the center of the streamer, and you pull on this, it reduces the streamer by about another 15%, which is really nice. Now this does two things. It reduces the size, but it also puts tension on it. But notice that it's wound two different directions at the same time. It's like taking a spring and twisting opposite ends. When you let go, it snaps. And that's what this streamer is going to do. So we can see now that this streamer fits very, very easily inside here. And this is how I put a 7-foot, 10-inch streamer inside of a very simple Gnome rocket. You can see there's a loop here. All I have to do is put this loop through that loop, pass the streamer through, and voila, it's attached to the recovery line that we have over here. So again, It's really easy to attach. I like attaching things with knots simply because clips and swivels, we just don't have space for it inside this rocket. So what's really nice is we just take a look at the streamer. It's very tight, short, and if we just simply let go, it just opens up and it literally springs apart. So it's, again, a very, very fast opening streamer. Now, in the air, of course, this will just simply continue to unfold and just separate the layers, and it just unwinds very, very quickly. And we now have a very nice streamer. And again, when this rocket is up really high, which is going to be typical of like an energy engine, it's going to be really, really hard to see, and all you're really going to see is the sparkling and probably a little bit of crinkling sound until it becomes visible again. I'd like to show you another piece of material. This is also some additional material, which is all silver. This is a holographic reflection, and again, just different styles. This is just a tad bit thicker than this one, so this is a little bit lighter than this one. So I'm going to use this in my smaller rockets and use this in my larger rockets. One thing I did on this particular streamer is that to make it flutter a little bit more, I actually put some little flaps on here that open up. So again, streamers are fun to experiment with, and you can do plenty of different things. I've put flaps and spoilers and all kinds of interesting things on my streamers, and I've got some very, very good results. So hopefully this video will encourage people to say, well, you know, I have my rocket. What else can I do with it? So if you built a Gnome rocket, go buy another one. Put a Kevlar cord on it. Buy some Kevlar felt, and set it up as a recovery system without that elastic band, and put some big streamers in it, and have fun. Simple as that. Thanks.